All right, you guys, welcome to the show. Are we on? Is everything working good?
What's going on, man?
How you doing?
Good, man.
Good. I hope we got a lot of time to talk about things tonight. Maybe I should just talk really, really fast because we got a lot of things to cover.
Oh, we're good. Just go ahead. I'm ready. I'm ready.
Yeah. Well, we had a good talk yesterday about all the things we had to talk about, and now there's even more things to talk about than that. You know what?
I'm caught up on a lot. Let me announce to put this out on Twitter.
Yeah, good. That's got this thing. All right. Looks like we got people in the chat room thingy saying things. That's good. How you guys doing? Pete, is it okay if we start with Waco? I'm sorry.
I'm good with that, man.
I got a personal problem with this. So everybody's good friend, especially mine, James Bovard, emailed me yesterday and said, "Hey, look at this new documentary about Waco." And it's really great, man. It's it feels kind of old-fashioned, like it was made in the 90s, which is funny that the 90s really does feel old-fashioned to me now. But anyway, but the lady's an expert in forward-looking infrared technology, Pete, and she's examining the FLIR footage, and she's doing her own separate re-debunking of the Danforth reports, or I don't know, she refers to a Cox report, which I'm not sure if that means Chris Cox, the former congressman, that he had a congressional report on the FLIR as well. But anyway, she dang all sorry, I forgot the bumper music was still playing. She goes through and re-debunks the debunking footage all along. He's the producer. They had the best footage all along, but it was just in the giant box full of piles and piles of stuff that they just didn't get to it until later. And they were like, "Oh, look, it's the first generation dub," you know? Anyway, it's clear that it's that there's gunfire in that footage. But she goes and says, "Now in this case, here is glint, and then here's the difference." And it's all fully scientific and great. And I'm gonna have her on the show tomorrow. So
cool.
it's kind of, yeah, I guess we'll revisit this topic next week when I've already, interviewed her and we've all heard it then. But the video, you know what? I have it here, and now all of a sudden I forgot the name of it. When the Government Lied, Waco's Infrared Deception. It's by Barbara Grant. Barbara Grant, and it just costs a couple of bucks to rent on Vimeo, is how I watched it. So it looks really good. And for people who are unfamiliar with the story, just real quick, is that on the final day of the FBI and Delta Force assault on the people there, that there was an FBI plane flying overhead with a forward-looking infrared. So this isn't night vision where it's, green tint enhanced light. This is infrared footage. And anyway, you can see in there's machine gun fire as the feds are killing the Branch Davidians as their house is burning down. And I think at one point she addresses one of the origins of the fire. But anyway, the main point is the machine gun fire. Now, the excuse is, no, these are just sun reflections off of, glass or other, metal material, whatever it is in the yard. And she explains here how that's not true. Now, it's important to note that part 3 of the series, The Rules of Engagement, A New Revelation, the third part is called The FLIR Project. And our friend Will Porter, by the way, has that on his YouTube channel. Anybody can watch it on YouTube right now. And what they do is they show how Senator John Danforth in 1999, after the movie A New Revelation, proved that they used incendiary rounds, pyrotechnic rounds, I should say, in the assault, that then they had to do a new cover-up, fake investigation, independent investigation. So they brought in Senator John Danforth, the Republican senator, and he came and did the new cover-up. And the way they did it was they recreated the footage out at Fort Hood, where they had planned the original assault in the first place, because that's what the U.S. Army is for, attacking church folk on Sunday morning. But anyway, so they went out to Fort Hood, and they did the exact same test. I mean, they set it up perfectly, Pete, except the only exceptions was they chose a windless day instead of a windy day. And also, they took a water truck, and they sprayed down the area so that there would be no dust and all the dirt would be wet on the ground. And then they gave the soldiers or the cops, whoever was firing the people doing the test firing, gave them extra long barrels on their rifles, and instead of their M4s or whatever it was they would have had, and then gave them flash suppressant ammunition that would have been different than what was assigned to the HRT at the time. So in other words, they rigged the test completely and totally from A to Z, from top to bottom, to make sure that then the FLIR would not show. And then they go, see, no flash. Yeah, well, that's because you cheated. And so anyway, that was their supposed debunking of the examination in a new revelation. And so the government's debunking has already been debunked. Now here comes this, video scientist to come, and she's got the highest pedigree too, by the way. She explains all of her expertise. She's an engineer in making infrared technology, and all this stuff, the top of her field. And then she re-debunks it. Anyway, I'm rambling, but the point is that wasn't a suicide. It was the FBI hostage rescue team and the Army Delta Force that massacred and murdered those people, and then they got away with it. They got away with it. Although, I mean, this is actually some good news that mostly got overlooked, was that David Chipman had to withdraw his nomination to be the ATF director. And this was the guy who has an ATF lawyer and helped prosecute the surviving Branch Davidians, who were acquitted and went to prison anyway, which I've explained that on, I think, your show in the past before, how that happened. But anyway. So it's an important story.
When I had Thibodeau on for a 2-part show, he explained how that happened too. So yeah, I mean, they were basically, a bunch of Texans said, nope, not guilty. And the judge said, yes, guilty.
Yep. Yeah, that's great. So what it was, I'll just explain real quick. They were charged with murder, conspiracy to commit murder of federal agents, and using a firearm in the commission of a felony. So a bunch of Texans, you're right, San Antonio jury said, man, they were defending themselves. ATF attacked first. The law in Texas says you have the right to defend yourself from unnecessary, aggressive, deadly violence, no matter who's doing it. And so they were acquitted. But there are a couple of, thin blue line types on the jury that insisted that, these horrible, lawless people can't just be allowed to get away with all of this 100%, thumbing their nose at law enforcement for 6 weeks, refusing to come out, and all of these things, which they weren't charged with. But anyway, and so something must be done. So they compromised and said, well, we'll find them guilty of using a firearm in the commission of a felony. So that comes in on, I think I got this right, but this is 25 years ago, Pete, but I'm pretty sure that comes in on a Friday. And the judge says, well, that's ridiculous. I mean, I'm dismissing that conviction because if you acquit them of the felony, you can't, convict them of using a firearm during the commission of it. And so that doesn't hold up, doesn't make sense. I'll have to dismiss that charge. Then he comes back over the weekend on Monday. He goes, you know what? I thought about it and I decided that what really happened was you meant to convict them of the felonies. You're admitting here that you agree that they are guilty of using a firearm in the commission of a felony. Well, what felony? Murder and conspiracy to commit murder of federal agents. That's what felony. And so he went ahead and sentenced them as though they had been convicted of murder and conspiracy to commit murder, even though they had been acquitted of both. It was just completely crazy. And, they went to jail for 10 and 15 and 20 years. They were sentenced as though they'd been convicted of, man one or something like that, whatever the equivalent is. But, they went, some of them went away for 15 years, I think was about the maximum they got. And just, the whole thing is madness. And so Chipman participated in that prosecution, and that was part of his reputation, and, plus just his overall, emphatic support for gun control, helped sink his nomination to be ATF director. So that's really good. So,
yeah. Anyway. I mean, when you look at it, when you watch, you've probably watched the documentaries more than I have, Rules of Engagement and New Revelation, but I've watched them at least 5-6 times a piece, and it's just clear. I mean, especially in New Revelation, when you have the FBI agents coming forward and go, to confess, hey, this is what happened there. Yeah. And then when Gifford talks about going into they looked at the evidence and they were calling like spent tear gas canisters silencers.
Yeah.
And I mean,
Well,
it was
it was,
just
yeah, and these were pyrotechnic, not incendiary rounds, but
right.
pyrotechnic rounds
Yeah.
that very, easily can start fires. In other words, incendiary rounds are meant to start fires. Pyrotechnic rounds very well can start fires.
Right.
And that is what these were. There were 3 of them. They were at all 3 origins of the fire, and they were all mislabeled as silencers in the evidence.
And then the front door disappears. I mean, this huge steel door that would have proven who fired, were they firing it from the inside, were they firing through from the outside, and everything. Right.
And that goes to the initial raid, not the firefight on the last day.
Right.
We got to make sure and keep those separate topics. But
yeah. But the thing that kills me is people will be like, well, that was just something that would never happen again. And as James Bovard has pointed out numerous times, there are mini Wacos every single day. They're called SWAT raids. Yeah, and there's exactly 50,000 a year.
No, I'm telling you, listen, I mean, this is the whole thing about it's actually maybe even like an argument against continuing to flog away at Ruby Ridge and Waco all the time, is it makes it seem like these are exceptions at all. Like, what's exceptions about them? What's exceptions about them is that the good guys shot back and defended themselves and won the initial round, leading to a prolonged siege and a giant media spectacle and a giant politicized, series of documentaries and every other thing about it, right? So that's what it was. It was the siege that made the difference. It was the firefight that, went the other way on the first day that made the difference. But in terms of an ATF style, paramilitary raid on people's homes, I mean, this to me is almost unbelievable, man. It's the last numbers that the ACLU put out said it was 60,000 a year. It used to be 50,000 a year, and now it's 60. And they're raiding over, and this is as pot is being legalized all across the country too. So who are they cracking down on? You know what I mean? Like, who is getting targeted in 60,000 SWAT raids a year? And this is not hostage situations. These are contraband, raids on people's civilian homes in the middle of the night. It's crazy. And in fact, it's actually remarkable how rarely people get killed in these things. And they do get killed in them. The Washington Post keeps a very close count of it now. And it's, on average, 2 people are killed every single day by the police in this country. I think actually, in terms of those night raids, those paramilitary night raids, that's a very small percentage of those, which to me is just a miracle. I mean, I don't know how in the land of the gun in the USA, where at least half the people are armed, people are breaking in your windows and doors in the middle of the night violently. It's amazing how rarely cops get killed and how rarely citizens get killed in those things, where I guess, the flash bang and the muzzle right in your face and guys screaming, get down, it's too late. It's over so quick. Colin Powell doctrine, overwhelming force, one and done. Like, you know what I mean? The battle's coup de main, right? They occupy your bedroom before you can even flinch. And so, but yeah, that's the way they do business. 60,000 raids a year like that. So, and this is should be a point of overlap where right wingers can understand how, poor and minority people feel being on the receiving end of that thing. They're like, look, this is just like Waco. Remember being mad about that? Hell, same thing for the wars. What's Iraq? It's at Waco over and over and over again in Iraq War II, the Delta Force showing up and obliterating everyone and moving on to the next one. I've seen that movie before, So yeah, the parallels are important, but we shouldn't let the message of those events like diminish what else is going on in the world. It ain't like the last time they did a Ruby Ridge was in 1992. Wouldn't that be great if the last time there was a Ruby Ridge? Yeah, we'll put that shit in a museum. Yeah, one time the marshals, the ATF and the marshals and the FBI HRT got way out of control, but not after that though. So, I don't know. And by the way, just real quick, and I promise not to go on and on about this, but just I noticed, I don't know if you saw this on Twitter, somebody tagged us both in this thing, where they added a disclaimer to your interview of me about Oklahoma City. That like, check here, and then it's a link to the Encyclopedia Britannica. That's like, yeah, this one guy did it. Everybody knows that, you know, and then that's it. Like, which is fine. I don't, you know, it's not like the official version has been kept from people or anything like that. And I don't think it was like an entry on like why the theory that a bunch of FBI informant neo-Nazis did it is not correct. I didn't see a link to that, you know. And in fact, frankly, I seem to remember not doing a very good job explaining in that interview. Like of all the times I've talked about Oklahoma City on the radio or on, you know, YouTube interviews with people and whatever, I think I did not do a real good job of really even talking about it in that one, other than to say like, yeah, McVeigh's friends were Nazis and look into it or, you know, some kind of thing. But that was enough to get fact checked, which is nice because you know what? Let people look into that.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh man, I forgot what I was gonna say. Oh, the whole thing. Then you mention that the son of a former prime minister of Germany or president of Germany was at Elohim City and he was being handled by the Southern Poverty Law Center. And it's like, well, you know, hey, there's something about that, you know.
Yeah.
That's kind of weird.
Okay. Don't let me spend the rest of the hour talking about this. All right. I swear, don't. But look, a guy was just tweeting about this yesterday where he went digging through the archives at the Libertarian Institute. It just so happens, Pete, that our little old Libertarian Institute. Did we introduce ourselves at the beginning of the show? I'm Scott. He's Pete. We're from the Libertarian Institute. And if you go to libertarianinstitute.org/OKC, you will find the world's single greatest archive of the truth about the Oklahoma City bombing. That's it. There's nothing that compares to it anywhere in the universe. And it's Richard Booth is the guy that gets the credit. Some of those documents are mine, but he's the one who put it all together, and he got plenty besides. And he's writing a book that we're going to publish, which is going to be great. And a guy, you know, I want to stop time and wrap up some OKC studies. You know what? I'm way behind on this stuff. Now, I've been good on it since the day it happened. Okay. But I'm way behind on the story. I would like to go and spend a week and a half or more digging through all of that, you know? But I'm trying to get to the point. There was a guy on the Twitter there who tagged us or somebody tagged us eventually in the conversation. But the guy was doing this deep dive on Andre Strassmeyer. And I'm not sure if he mentioned the SPLC in the documents that he was looking at. But he was looking at where, like, they admitted that this guy was CIA. The CIA admitted that he was CIA. You know, not an officer, but an agent working for them, an asset working for them. And that next to his name was the code AO. I like this because this is weedy stuff, you know, not smoking weed, but like in the weeds. And now, so if you go back to The Secret Life of Bill Clinton, which is a very kind of trashy name for a book, but it's good journalism by Ambrose Evans Pritchard. He talks about this in there. He goes, look at this document. They go, Andre Strassmeyer, AO. And then, so they had said, oh yeah, that meant admitted that he overstayed his visa. And they're like, bullshit, that is not what that means. And then, I'm sorry, I forget the exact quote now, but it was, you know, something about being an asset of theirs, an informant of theirs. And then, yeah, this is the guy who at least is the center of all the conspiracy theories about Oklahoma City, was that he was the agent provocateur who was, look, he was tied to McVeigh. You know, the degree to which they deny that he was tied to McVeigh, when it's proven that he was tied to McVeigh in so many ways, including McVeigh calling him right after arranging the Ryder truck. And including, and people can see this, and I only know this thanks to Richard Booth. I had totally missed this. But there's footage of these strippers from the hotel. You can find this on YouTube right now. I should have had it queued up so we can punch it into this thing. I need to learn how to do all that. for this video show. But what it is these strippers would always fight and steal from each other and stuff. And so the manager put a camera in their dressing room, and they all knew about it and stuff. It wasn't like secret, but it was just to keep the peace, basically. But so he had audio and video. So there's footage of the stripper going, yeah, there's, you know, that weird German guy. Well, you know, the other guy with him, I'm paraphrasing here, folks, but this is the deal. The other guy with him was saying, yeah, you better remember me, because on April the 19th, I'm going to be real famous, and you're going to never forget this night and this and that. And you can see the footage of her that night in real time saying to her friend, gee, Stacy, these weird guys out there saying this weird stuff. Oh, that German guy? Yeah, no, his friend was the one who said this. You know? Anyway, and there's more. There's a ton more. There's a million more. I'll tell you this. Nobody saw McVeigh in Oklahoma City who did not see him with somebody else. Okay? Not one person saw him alone.
Remember when they tried to sell that John Doe number 2 was Middle Eastern and it was radical Islamic terrorism?
Yeah, and who was that? It was Lori Milroy from the American Enterprise Institute in concert with Judith Miller, Scooter Libby's girlfriend, and the lady that lied us into war with Iraq.
And man, and Glenn Beck back in the early 2000s picked up on that and was reporting on that too. It was painful.
I'll tell you, someone just was saying to me the other day, hey, in your book, you say that Chris Hedges helped lie us into war. I thought he was an anti-war guy. So I says, oh, yeah, no, eventually, sure. But, and then I linked to 3 New York Times articles where he's saying Iraq backs Al-Qaeda. And then one of them is a positive review of Milroy's book. Oh, my God, it was Saddam was behind Osama all along. Oh, you know what? I guess being an anti-war guy after that is okay, but maybe he should just go wash dishes and not say anything anymore after that, you know? Washing dishes is a admirable profession. I'm not knocking that at all. I've washed plenty of dishes in my life, believe me, for low pay. I'm just saying, you know, when I was washing dishes, my opinions belonged to me and the couple other poor suckers stuck with me back there in the kitchen. I don't think anybody should have to listen to you after you wrote a positive review of Lori Milroy's book in the New York Times. I didn't even know that one. I just found it. Anyway.
You want to jump to topics, or you want to go?
Oh yeah, no. Look, the top story of the day is the Yemen resolution passed. They stuck an anti-Yemen war resolution on the NDAA. It passed by just a couple of votes. 11 Republicans supported it, and 218 of them, or whatever it was, opposed it. No, it was less than that, fewer than that. 200 something Republicans opposed it.
So does it go to Biden or does it go to the Senate?
Well, the Senate has to pass it. Then it goes to conference committee, and see, the bad, like watered down version of the resolution also passed. So then, of course, the game will be to switch them out in conference committee and all that. So it's a minor victory, and it's going to take, a lot more activism to, try to actually get it through. But, so Ro Khanna from California, the Democrat, he's really all about this. And you know what? That horrible, horrible Chris Murphy, who I'm almost certain is like the single worst senator on Russiagate, like even to this day, for whatever reason, he's good on this too in the Senate. And
that's Connecticut.
Yeah. And Bernie Sanders is good on it too. And so, there, I don't know. I'm going to have, I got to have Hassan El-Tayeb is from the Friends Committee on National Legislation. He's this great activist working on this. And so I'm going to have him back on the show. I had him on a couple days ago. I'm going to have him back on the show to do the update on, what's the next stage of activism and all of that. But, I'll take note that when the House and the Senate passed the war. Oh, I was going to say, I'm sorry. If they screw this whole process over and go on as status quo, which is probably expected here, if they get away with doing that, I think Ro Khanna will then introduce another war powers resolution thing the way that he did under Trump, which was world historical, that the Congress actually issued, the war powers resolution and passed it to try to get, which they could have defunded the damn war. But, that's what they're trying to do with this thing, is halt all funding for any participation in it. But anyway, so they'll move on to that. But under Trump, when they did that, of course, Trump vetoed it. But when the Senate passed that, the UAE withdrew their army. and said, you know what, we better cycle this thing down. We'll keep paying Al-Qaeda mercenaries, you know, to fight. But they pulled their army out of there, which, you know what, like on the margin, that doesn't sound like much unless you're the one on the margin doing the living or dying, you know, under their torture and under their murderous, you know, campaign there. So it's not nothing. And so, you know, I think that kind of thing is important, which, you know, Biden promised he's going to end the war, Pete. He goes, look, he came in at the beginning of February, and he had promised this a year ago. At the beginning of February, he goes, listen, we're going to help the Saudis, like with Patriot missiles and drones, like with Patriot missiles and anti-aircraft stuff to shoot down missiles and drones that the Houthis try to send across the border into Saudi. But we're not going to help the Saudis bomb Yemen anymore. No more maintenance, no more logistics, no more intelligence, no more coordination, no more, you know, refueling supplies of bombs or any of that. And then they just dropped it, and then they just went on anyway. And I don't know that they've gone on to the full extent as before, but I know that Admiral Kirby, the spokesman for the Pentagon, admitted that they're still doing maintenance. Well, if the Americans aren't doing the maintenance and the care and feeding of the F-15s, they don't fly. So that's it. You know, the princelings don't take care of those planes. They don't know how to take care of those planes. And so, in other words, Joe Biden has not done what he said he was going to do to call the thing to an end here. And so it's got to be pushed. And then I want to bring up a side point here, and this is not a criticism of anybody else, because it's actually like the opposite of that. But I'll just mention everybody's friend Sal, the great memer from Twitter, was saying, no, we should not be calling our congressmen and asking them to do the right thing, because this is my words, not his, but like that, you're being cucked or whatever. You should just do the, you know, I guess adopt alternative financial systems and drop out of the grid. And, you know, if we all did that, if we all quit participating in the thing, then it would go away faster, better, or something. And my thing is this, man, is that he ain't wrong, but also I'm not wrong. And so my call is just, you know, against sectarianism. You know, at antiwar.com, you know, it's all run by libertarians. It always has been, but we're not sectarians. We're trying to end the wars, and we're trying to convince everybody that anti-war is for you. And you always hear me talk about how when Ron Paul ran for president, he goes, listen, this is, you know, my paraphrase of him. If you like your identity, you can keep it, right? This mythology that you have to be a liberal Democrat or worse to be anti-war is not true. Look at me. Republican, Texas, conservative, Christian congressman, anti-war as hell. More anti-war than Michael Moore. And why? Because of fidelity to the Constitution and all of these kind of principles and precepts and stuff. So people go, oh, okay, I can be anti-war because of, you know, what that guy's bringing forward, that kind of thing. So this is the same kind of thing that, you know, this is why, if you ask Eric Garris, the way he'll say it is, we run Daniel Ellsberg and Pat Buchanan on the same day. You know, my book, I just got Noam Chomsky said, Fool's Errand is the best book on Afghanistan he ever read. Well, but that's also what Colonel Douglas McGregor, the regular guest on the Tucker Carlson show, the, you know, crusty old conservative America Firster, said the same thing. Said he told the Army War College to read it. You know, I'm not like patting myself on the back about that. I'm just trying to say that that's what at antiwar.com, that's what our mission is, right? Is to appeal to everyone, to get everyone to agree, not to become libertarians, but to get good on Afghanistan, get good on Yemen, get good on the things that matter the most to us, which is the wars. And I think as libertarians, there's no need to be sectarian, especially considering that libertarians are going to do their own thing anyway, right? Like, I have fantasies where, like, what if every libertarian focused only on Yemen for the next 6 months, all of us, and that was all of our thing? Maybe that would move the margin. That would get it done in whatever fashion, working pressure on Congress or whatever you got. But if it was just Yemen, 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 Yemen at Reason Magazine and at Cato and at antiwar.com and all, but that ain't going to happen, right? Yemen, that's the thing I care about a lot. And I mean, a lot of people care about it, but they're not going to be activists on it all the time. But that's fine, right? So the thing is, considering libertarians going to do whatever they're going to do anyway, there ain't no reason to fight about why, like, everybody ought to be doing the same thing as me, or everybody ought to be doing the same thing as you. And I know you get into these kind of squabbles on opposite sides of things of these sometimes too. And I can, and especially in the past, but I'm really trying hard to not be sectarian. I'm very guilty of, like, that guy Alex Narasta at Cato, who a lot of people don't like for a lot of reasons or whatever it was. I misread a tweet of his to, like, really be like some pretty crass justification of nuking Japan. And I was like, I hate this guy, and I hereby kick him out of the libertarian movement and screw him and all this. And then, like, I realized eventually somebody said to me, dude, Horton, you got that tweet wrong. He's not adopting that position. He was just outlining what that position was. And you just totally took the wrong tone and freaked out. And of course, what was it? I got mad, and so I got stupid. And then so I started this sectarian fight with a guy who I've always gotten along with. I've interviewed Alex before, and I did a speech with him at the New Jersey Libertarian Party thing. And I think he could be a jerk to other people on Twitter before. I've seen him do that and whatever, but I picked a fight with a guy and I shouldn't have. I apologize and made it right with the guy. But that's a lesson to me. It should be a lesson to all of us that, like, ain't nothing wrong with being a Catoite. The Cato guys do incredible work. And look at the Young Americans for Liberty and the effect they have, especially in the state houses, in trying to get, state house level Republicans to hold true to Ron Paul type principles rather than just, going with whatever the country club guys or the Baptist ministers or whatever pressure group is saying at whatever time, but to hold them to constitutionalist type principles. You got the Free State Project up there, who those guys now, they told me they rule more than half the House of Representatives up there, even though they don't have the speakership, but they kind of support the speaker because he ain't too bad, something like that. You got, I don't know, whatever, all, different ideas. People want to do homesteading at sea. What do you call that? Where they're doing the seasteading and all that. Yeah. Like, even if, like, let's say you just think, like, no, dude, I'm a full Hortonian and we ought to all just only be anti-war all day, no matter what. Like, you got to admit that seasteading is an interesting topic that might get some stranger interested in libertarianism at all. And he might find the Yemen war in 2 weeks. And seasteading might be the perfect path to that. So you might think, man, that's kind of pissing in the wind. But you know what? Someone else might think that's a really cool idea. So, like, that's all I'm saying. I'm only saying that Sal is wrong, that I'm wrong, but I ain't saying that Sal is wrong. I think Sal's great. And and look at how much influence he has with all this great, crazy memes that he puts on the Twitter all damn day. It's one of my favorite guys out there. So, but yeah, anyways, I just think that, if I was telling people that, look, guys, democracy is really important and we got to all believe in it really, really hard, and call our congressman and make our congressman love us and care about us and respect us and do what we say, well, that would be a load of crap, right? But I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, listen, if we make their phone ring off the hook, then that moves the margin a little bit. That's a little bit, And, I don't know. The guy, I called my congressman today. I talked to his staffer, and he's a Republican for a Republican congressman. And I go, look, Barack Obama's the one who did this, and he's bombing. He's not bombing Al Qaeda. Him and Biden, I skipped Trump. Him and Biden, they're not bombing Al Qaeda. They're bombing for Al Qaeda. They're bombing Al Qaeda's enemies and strengthening Al Qaeda. I mean, that's just true. I know it sounds crazy, but look it up, man. 2015 on, we've been fighting the Houthis for the benefit of Al Qaeda. Even Obama's friends at the New York Times and CNN admit it. And admit it is the correct term. They're like, geez, I mean, we kind of got to admit that, yeah, that's true. Like, that's the way they frame it, because it is. And so, I mean, at least I planted a seed in that guy's head. He understood what I said in clear enough English, and he's not going to forget it. I don't know if it's going to make the difference for him, but it's a little bit of something. And I was looking, it's not up yet, the roll call. I wanted to see if my congressman voted good on it. I bet he didn't, but be interesting to see. But it did pass. And look, so what's the opposite of that as far as the activism? What if just nobody did the activism? What if everybody just said, well, whatever, the military's going to do what the military's going to do, and the Saudis are going to do what the Saudis are going to do, and Boeing and Raytheon and Lockheed are going to do what they're going to do, and there's nothing we can do about it, and then they just didn't do anything? Then that resolution would not have passed today. We wouldn't have moved the ball forward at all, right? This wouldn't be an issue in the Congress at all. And, again, the difference it makes is only marginal. I'm not selling, magic elixir or anything, But in this case, we're talking about the worst thing in the world, right? There's no, I spun my globe and I thought real hard about it. There's not another thing going on in the world that's as bad as what's going on in Yemen right now. And it's our government that's doing it. So, it seems like, Michelle Flournoy, the horrible Michelle Flournoy, her and her group in the 90s at the Pentagon coined the phrase full spectrum dominance. But that's what we need to do, right? The libertarians need to be the loudest voice in the Libertarian Party. That'd be great. And the libertarians need to be the loudest voice in the Republican Party, and the loudest voice even among the Democrats, the loudest voice among the MMA fighter community and the Hollywood nerds and the tech bro geeks and the whatever factions you got, the Black Lives Matter people, whoever it is. The libertarians are the ones who thought all this stuff through already and already, have the right answers to all of this stuff. And so we should be, flooding the zone, as they say. And instead of like everybody concentrate on one thing, everybody, as Ron Paul says, concentrate on your own thing, figure out what it is. In fact, this is where I should finally shut up and ask you a question and let you talk for a while, because I know you've been thinking long and hard about, well, what it is that you want to do other than just a show, that you want to really focus on your local politics. And truth is, I just don't have time to listen to everybody's shows anymore. So, or never did really. So I listen to your show sometimes, but I don't know like exactly what all your thinking is about, where it is that you want to focus your efforts in the near and medium term future and stuff like that. So why don't you tell us?
Yeah, and I think it is local politics. And unfortunately, I guess in a way that foreign policy would take a back seat, because you're just concentrating on what's most local. And unfortunately, like in local constitutions, if your local town has a constitution, there's probably not going to be written in state nullification that you can nullify state. But you can just get to the point where if you get a few people in there, you get some really good influence, which is going to take money. Let's face it, that's part of it. Right. You get a couple people who are on your side elected, and then you start pushing it in a direction of liberty, of more independence, of privatization of some things, and you really start infesting them with that kind of thing. I mean, literally, your local sheriff is probably more important than the Army, the U.S. Army at this point. Your local sheriff can keep the Department of Health and the health department that wants to come in and make sure that everybody got jabbed. If there's a mandate, your sheriff can go, nope, you're not coming in here. This is our
We've
town.
Seen that too.
Yeah.
We saw that in the last year, right? Especially like in California, where some of those sheriffs were just, nope, we're not doing that. Sorry. What are you going to do about
Sal says politics? Sal says politics legitimizes their claim, in my opinion. Same reason you don't negotiate with terrorists. Here's the problem. That sounds great. I love the sentiment, but me voting in a local election doesn't legitimize it. It legitimizes it because 99% of my neighbors believe it's legitimate. And I love the whole thing about if we all drop out, they have no power, but we're not all going to drop out. So stop living in Ancapistan in your head or Agoristan in your head. There is a real world here with real people who desire safety, and they think that safety is the local police or the national. If there's a market for something, it's going to be provided. This is simple economics. This is Austrian economics. If there is a market for protection and they want it to be centralized, they are going to get centralized protection. The best thing that you can do is on the most local level, try to influence that as much as possible. Saying that not everybody's going to drop out. Not 2% are going to drop out. I'm sorry. I love the idea.
If all the libertarians dropped out,
that would be 3% of the population, 2% of the population.
Yeah. Now, I used to think, I'm sorry, did I already say this? I was thinking this earlier. I used to think when I was a kid that if all the hippies, instead of like doing drugs and like being hippies and listening to Jimi Hendrix, had all gone clean for Gene all along and had focused and on the civil rights movement, all those people, if everybody had all got together and all just focused on ending the war in Vietnam, maybe they could have ended it 5 years earlier or something like that. But the thing is, That's actually bullshit, right? Like if all those hippies had not been hippies and it all just been the best anti-war Democrats they could be, that wasn't going to change everything. It might have moved the margin a bit, but so really, and at the same time, think about how much doing acid and playing crazy music and all of that actually did get through to people and make people freer in so many ways. You know what I mean? Where like maybe they didn't end the war, maybe the war lasted an extra year, but they blew a lot of minds too. So what the hell, you know, it's the same thing. And again, like I'm all for agorism. By all means, use some crazy shit coin at your farmer's market and get away with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Oh, yeah. Oh, I have no
absolutely.
problem. I
Yeah.
have no problem with it. I'm not deluding myself into thinking it's going to take down the empire.
Yeah.
It's going to take a lot of things to take down the empire, but there is a way to protect yourself from the empire in the meantime. And having a police force on your side is one way to do it. I mean,
Or a
that's where
less
the
worse
Birchers,
one anyway. You
well,
know?
yeah, that's the way
Yeah.
that's the way the Birchers had it right. I mean, the Birchers were always right about that. I mean, they supported their local police when the local police were still doing terrible things, but they theoretically they had the right idea. And Hoppe wrote about this 25 years ago, talking about taking over local towns and like creating 10,000 independent city states. It's just taken us it took 18 months of lockdowns and people being threatened to have things injected into their body in order
Yeah.
for people to start talking about stuff like this. Imagine if 25 years ago, people had started implementing and started going after their local government, libertarians. Imagine where we could be right now. But, let's start it now. I mean, and do agorism. Do whatever the hell you think is going to do best. But to think that yours is the only way, it's just full of shit. I mean, you're full of shit. It's just like me saying that if I take over my local town, here in Ohio, that Texas is going to be free. I could free Texas by doing that. No, you're going to have to do that. I mean, we can insulate ourselves, but if people started insulating themselves in certain ways, I mean, you could really see some big change.
Yeah. And look, I mean, I picked basically the most impossible task of all to take on here in trying to oppose the wars and the empire. And I know that, probably on the day I die, there'll still be an American world empire. And I'll be like, gosh, shucks, that kind of sucks. There's a level of pissing in the wind here that I understand. I've been teaching people about Iran's nuclear program for 20 years. And I look at the polls where a supermajority thinks they already got nukes. Well, hell, might as well have just stayed home. Well, I did, but you know what I mean. But at the same time, though, man, the real anti-war was all the anti-war people whose minds we changed along the way. And again, on the margin, the time scale on which these wars end. It's just I'm only playing a very bit part in this. But if there was no anti-war movement in America at all, nobody really was objecting to this, where the anti-war feeling vets had nowhere to look, for information to figure out what the hell's going on around here and to agree with, to oppose this stuff with, then the war in Afghanistan would still be rolling on. Our guys would still be at the Bagram Air Base right now. And I think mostly it's the Taliban that won that war rather than anti-war forces in America. I'll give them the credit for that. But, it seems significant. And it also seems significant that, to me, I've never really been too much of a preacher of just libertarianism itself, because I don't really like arguing all about angels on the head of a pin and the non-aggression principle applies in every single circumstance that you can imagine and whatever. I don't really like talking about that stuff so much. But I do kind of like the idea of people realizing that it's the libertarians who are the best on this foreign policy stuff year in and year out, no matter what. And that there's a reason for that. You know what I mean? And leftists think that capitalism necessarily leads to imperialism. Well, if that's so, how come the libertarians are so damn good on this stuff all the time? There must be something more to it than that. And I know we've made a lot of libertarians and a lot of anti-war guys. Just in the traveling I've done this year, I've had a lot of veterans come up to me. Just the other day on September 11th, I'm in Washington, D.C. And this guy, I forget now if he was a Marine or a soldier. came up to me and had been in the wars. Man, I'm sorry. Now I forget if he was in Iraq or Afghanistan. I think he was in Afghanistan. And anyway, it mattered to him that he had like somewhere to go to know that this, what the truth of all this was, what it was that he was a part of over there and all of that. So I'll settle for that, right? Like, I don't know, man. It's possible that me and all the people that I influenced that all call their congressmen in the last couple of days had no influence whatsoever. Probably it didn't, right? It was probably the Quakers' influence that moved the margin. But at least we're giving it a shot, and we don't really know for sure. And it seems to me like it's worth trying. And especially, again, where this is the worst thing in the world. That to me has always been the priority with, being an anti-government extremist, is opposing the worst part of it. Like, I'm against the post office too. You don't want to get me started on my rant against the goddamn post office, but in the scheme of things, I don't really give a shit about it. You know what I mean? Because there's a genocide in Yemen going on, and we're going to pay attention to that instead.
Well, I think if we're talking about war, it seems like right-wingers have been sold, right-wingers and a lot of libertarians have been sold that China is, going to take over either militarily or monetarily the world, and we're going to be Chinese serfs. And can you talk a little bit about the AUKUS? AUKUS, because there's a lot of implications in that. And I actually came up with a little history on like where a lot of this with Australia actually started. So,
well, I mean, I'll just say real quickly, they accused Donald Trump of being a pro-Russian traitor so much that he took a really hawkish stand on Russia. And there was even at least one good quote of his son saying, now let's see him call us pro-Russian traitors now after this, kind of thing. They're deliberately bend their policy that way. And I think that that's a real problem of all these right-wingers accusing Joe Biden of being the Chinese puppet, is that now, I don't know if that really has anything to do with it or not, but certainly he has this extra incentive to be Mr. Tough Guy on China and complete the pivot to China that, frankly, had not gone through very well. And they've been hobbled with their other wars in the Middle East. If you do a survey of anti-Afghan war articles published this year, I bet you'll find a super majority of them end with, that way we can pivot to China. It's been like that in all the papers. So, and that's a big part of that thinking. So I think, that's the real danger, is that, and I want to bring this up real quick. Kaitlyn Johnstone, the Australian leftist, published on Twitter. She posted this video of John Mearsheimer, who we like John Mearsheimer because he wrote the book, The Israel Lobby and U.S. Foreign Policy with Stephen Walt. And he's a decent guy on some things. But he's a realist, not an anti-interventionist. And realist just means, hey, great nations are going to play great nation games, so let's play them smart and well instead of doing stupid things for moralistic reasons. That can be pretty evil. So here he's giving a speech in Australia, and he's telling the Australians that you have to choose us or China, and you have to choose us. And if you choose China, or if you choose neither, you choose China. And if you choose China, then you make an enemy out of us, and we will not forget it. And we will make your life hell. We will ruin you. We will destroy you. Don't even think about telling us no. Like, wow, pretty bad. These are supposedly our friends. And he's like kind of smiling and grinning, like, haha, we're all friends here, as he says it. But yeah, it's pretty clear. And so Johnstone posts this and says, I want you people to see that Australia does not join the United States of America to protect itself from China. It joins the United States of America to protect itself from the United States of America.
Yeah.
This is crazy. This is, British Empire stuff, but it's us. And then, of course, it does include the British Empire, as you were saying.
So, it was like Obama was the one who really started on the Australia thing. And
him and Hillary.
Yeah, Hillary teamed with the Hawks and the Pentagon and announced there would be like America's Pacific Century. And in like November of 2011, Obama goes to the Australian Parliament, gives a speech, announcing the pivot that America is back and all in on Asia, and that America would rotate troops in and out of the port of Darwin in the northern part of Australia. And then after which the Australian press declared that Obama had declared a long march against China's authoritarianism. And basically the press signed Australia up for the campaign. I mean, this started in 2011, and it started because Obama basically brought Hillary in, and you know what's going to happen if you bring Hillary in.
Right. And people can just search foreignpolicy.com, Hillary Clinton, China, and you'll see her big article about this and, announcing the inauguration of the new policy.
Yeah. And it's just led up to just more and more. There was a lease that China had on the Darwin port in 2015, and the U.S. leaned on them, and they were like, look, our troops are going in and out of there. So this has to be broken. And they basically just set up Australia as anti-China, and basically set it up so that they would be on our side as the war on China, basically the Cold War starts. I mean, we're in a Cold War with China. People can deny that as much as they want, but but then you have like China's Evergrande, their Lehman Brothers is going on right now, and there was an article on the BBC this week basically trying to play it off, saying that they owed in their domestic bonds an estimated of 35.9 million, and they've announced that they're going to pay it off so that they can give some investors some relief. Except what they bury in the bottom is that the developer Evergrande is also due to make an 83.5 million interest payment on overseas bonds today. So we need to see exactly what that's going to mean. I mean, people talk about I was corrected on how to pronounce it today. Was it the won? They call it, we pronounce it the yuan, and I think it's supposed to be the won or something like that.
Yeah.
And from what I understand from reading Stockman, there are countries that China is trading with now, doing business with now, who won't even accept it. China's actually using US dollars, which helps to keep our house of cards going, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, man, as we discussed before, David Stockman, and look, he's always a doomsayer predicting a crash, but he's always right. I don't know about the timing, but his point is not, I don't know. Yeah, China's fundamentals are strong. No, his point is their fundamentals are not strong at all. And the whole thing is such a political economy over there. And so therefore, wherever there's political intervention, it's a distortion.
Well, also cultural, when it comes to China, when articles start being written and manifestos start being put out about how the culture has been tainted by the West, I mean, that is a clear signal that people are worried, that there is panic going on over there. And what would the panic be? Is the panic over U.S. ships and Chinese ships in the South China Sea, coming close to each other? No, this is a panic of monetary and cultural. They're about ready. Right. In my opinion, you could see a cultural revolution happen there. If a cultural revolution happens there, I think you've said it before. We said on the last episode, it would be directed inward. And of course, there'd be some economic damage here, but it's not going to be nearly as bad. And I still see people post worried about the Chinese military going up and crossing, invading, going through Russia and crossing over the Bering Sea and coming down and invading the United States. These people are insane. They have their military is first of all, if one of their destroyers went up against ours, we take it down in like 5 minutes. I mean, their ships aren't even on the same level. You can read the book by Michael Beckley, Unrivaled, and he just explains how their military is basically, it's like a Potemkin village. They have all this stuff that just looks fantastic, but it's no different than when you go into North Korea and they show you the store filled with groceries. It's all fake. And,
well, I mean, they got it where it counts, kid, right? Like, It's the supersonic sea skimming missiles that say that you can stay away from our coast, please. And that's enough, right? That's, the American military calls I don't know what the Chinese call it. I think the Americans made this up as their title for the Chinese strategy. And they call it A2AD, which I'm going to forget what that's called. What's this for now? Is it anti-access area denial? That was it. I was losing access there. Anti-access area denial. In other words, they can keep us out of the South China Sea if it comes to a big fight, because their missiles have a longer range than our F-18s do. So, okay. But other than that, and I don't know what kind of supplies they have of those things, but as far as like an offensive force to conquer outer Mongolia or Siberia, or to march into Afghanistan or something
They couldn't
like
even
that.
go into Vietnam right now. They couldn't go into Vietnam.
Of course not. The Vietnamese are hard to beat. The Chinese know that too.
What do you mean?
The Chinese have found that out the hard way more often, harder than the Americans have. So yeah, listen, I think you understand this, and a lot of people understand this, that this is business. It's big business. The long range bombers, they're making a whole brand new long range bomber now. They, continue to churn out aircraft carriers. We got 22 aircraft carriers, 11 of which are on station at all times across the planet, and with their entire carrier battle groups along with them on patrol, and, ruling all 7 seas forever. And there's just so much money in building up against the Chinese threat. Now, the Russians, I think Vladimir Putin's been real smart about this, and he just keeps cutting the defense budget. He's like, look, we're going to focus on making some new nukes to keep y'all out of here. But other than that, he's cutting the budget. It's like the Ayatollah. I'm not making nuclear weapons, man. Send your IAE inspectors right in. They'll tell you. It's cool. The Chinese instead are building up, but building up what? From what? Right now they have 2 aircraft carriers, both of which I'm almost certain are used from the old Soviet Union. Like one of them, I know one of them is a diesel carrier from the old Soviet Union that they kind of tried to revamp and use. And then I think they're building their second one now. But then for their naval, air force, and whatever, you're right. There's no way that they can match us on the high seas as far as all that goes. But could they take Taiwan and keep us away while they do it, or make the cost high enough for the Americans to keep us out while they take Taiwan? Yeah, probably. They've done a lot of red team exercises where they show the U.S. Navy loses a fight over Taiwan. You got to get all your assets over there. By there, it's too late anyway. And, but crossing the Bering Strait and marching into Alaska and down into British Columbia and Washington State and all this kind of thing. I mean, essentially, you got to not have read anything in your life before and only just listen to talk radio and believe whatever you're told, and not have any true things to compare it to. Just think of the troop ships it would take to bring the PLA across the Pacific Ocean. And then what are the Americans going to do while they sail across the Pacific Ocean? Nothing. Or sink every single one of their boats before they get past Hawaii. I mean, what are we talking about? It's crazy.
Another implication of this whole treaty between Australia, the US, and the UK is the fact that France had a contract to build, I believe, nuclear subs for,
Right.
nuclear subs for Australia. And this basically nullifies that contract. And now it's going to be a joint US UK venture. And France is pissed about it, and a lot of people will be like, "Oh, who cares what the French say and everything?" They've pulled their ambassadors from the United States, and they pulled them from Australia over this. And
beautiful.
Yeah, it's really awesome. And the other thing that people don't really think about with this is the fact that France is one of the strongest partners in NATO.
Right.
So what does this do to NATO?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, hey, we can celebrate some silver linings. There's one, to think that this could really, be a break inside the NATO project, which, by the way, just finished being completely humiliated in Afghanistan. That was a NATO failure as well there, just as well as it was a team building exercise, in their words, for them to do it. It's, at their expense when they lost it the way that they did. And so, yeah, if this helps, drive a real wedge, and, the French are pretty proud of their independence from the NATO, project. They've quit NATO before and had to be brought back in. But, so I guess, yeah, we'll see how that goes. But it is, you got to wonder with these Democrats, right? Whether when they had this conversation, like, okay, so are the French going to be mad or what? Like, what do they even take this kind of thing into account? Like what it's going to cost NATO, or, how they're going to handle that. And then back to the necessity of it. It's not that the Australians are threatened by the Chinese. They're just threatened by us. We want them to participate in our game. That's it.
Oh, yeah, the United States wants to make Port Darwin like Okinawa. That's exactly what they want. That's exactly that's. Come on, we know this. We've been watching this game since World War II. I mean, we haven't been watching it, but those of us who read know what's going on. Yeah.
And, I think I'm probably repeating myself from last week, but it's a good one anyway. It was Norquist was hosting the panel discussion at Freedom Fest that I was on with a nice young lady from Reason magazine named, sorry, I forget her name right now off the top of my head. She was really good though. But Norquist said that, look, man, China's surrounded by at least adversaries, right? Or people who certainly want them out: Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia, and Pakistan and Afghanistan and Mongolia and Russia and Korea and Japan. I think that's all the way 360 degrees, right? We got Canada and Mexico and 2 oceans, right? Like we have no actual national security threats at all. They've got, did I leave out India? I left out India, and they're, where they've had war with India over their border in the Himalayas. Yeah. So, the Chinese have a lot of defensive military needs that have nothing to do with global conquest whatsoever, but just trying to keep their own border secure and keep relations with all of those different states stable at the same time. The idea that they're going to rise up and take over Asia, much less the United States, is just bananas. I mean, look at, again, I'm sorry, I don't remember where I said this before or not, if it's last show or repetition or not, but if they want to build a highway to Lisbon, then they're going to have to kiss everybody's ass all the way there, right? They can't be a merciless, cruel, ruthless empire rampaging through as they build a fiber optic line and a railway and a highway and electric lines and stuff for the entire breadth of Eurasia from Shanghai to Lisbon. I mean, this is the most, it's, if they even really try it, this whole Belt and Road thing across Eurasia, this is like the biggest civilian project, infrastructure project in the history of the world. And they're just going to let any Kazakh with a chip on his shoulder blow it up whenever he feels like it, because they go around lording it over everyone and trying to abolish Islam and hoist the red flag over everybody's capital as they march through. No fucking way. You would need 2 billion Chinese, 3 billion to keep all the barbarians at bay on a project like that. It's just there's just crazy to think that.
But the people who listen to Steve Bannon on a daily basis are going to tell you that they're just going to go in there and they're going to use political influence, and then they'll just be the political influence all over every country that they go through, and that they'll basically every country they go through will be their vassal state.
Sure. Yeah, no, they'll just wave their magic wand and everybody will just do whatever they say. They'll just print money and everyone will be like, wow, money. And then
why hasn't anybody asked Bannon what his business interests are in China? The guy lived on a boat with a Chinese billionaire for like a year. What are his business interests in China? That's really all. Really at this point, that's all. Yeah.
How that's big really was that boat?
I mean, it's a billionaire, man. You can imagine, But yes. I mean, think about it. Come on. I want to know what his business interests are there. Yeah. No one's asked him that.
Yeah, or maybe he's just heavily invested in Boeing. You know, I don't know. Anyway, hey, listen. So people are gonna get tired of us talking here real quick, especially me. So let me just say real quick. I thought it was great the way Mike Preisner and oh, he's my guy too. I've interviewed him a bunch of times. Help me out. They both confronted W. Bush over the last couple
Oh
of days.
God!
Giving
Oh
speeches and
God!
stuff.
God!
It's the guy
I
for
can't remember.
fairness and accuracy in reporting who I like.
Yeah.
Is it Graham something? God damn it! Somebody smart help me out. But it was Preisner, who I'm 99% sure is married to Abby Martin, right? He and this other guy both they confronted W. Bush. So Preisner was in Iraq War II apparently, and is yelling at W. Bush, "My friends are dead. You sent me to war on a lie, and my friends are dead, and you belong in prison," and all this stuff. And it's notable in the footage that I saw. You can't see W. Bush. You just see Preisner saying his piece, but you can hear the crowd just groans, and the groan. You know, it's hard to kind of intuit these sort of things. I admit that, but it doesn't sound, Pete, to me like, oh God, this guy's being rude and interrupting. It sounded like their groan was against the substance of what he said. He goes, "You killed," he goes, "because of you, 1 million Iraqis are dead." And then the audience goes, "Oh God." You know, this is in Beverly Hills. And they're just like, "Oh God, 1 million dead Iraqis. Who cares?" You know, like you're talking about that time that squirrel got hit by a car 6 years ago. Give me a break, man. Nobody cares about that. Just like it's nothing at all, which actually I hate it when I hit a squirrel, you know, it's really bad. But if somebody did that on purpose, that would be really bad. But they're just like, "Oh God, 1 million dead Iraqis." So anyway, but the point is that Bush didn't get up there and say, "Oh yeah, no, I'm a nice, an acceptable member of polite society. I give speeches and interviews and things sometimes. Look at me." That no, you don't get that. You get at least the, proverbial shoe at the head, if not literally. Screw you, man. You're not welcome outside. Go home. Go away, if not to jail. Which is great narrative. Then the next day or 2 days later, this guy, I'm so sorry I'm forgetting his name. I know this guy. I've interviewed him on my show a bunch of times about stuff he's written. He's a leftist from Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting.
It's not Jeff Cohn, is it?
No, it's not. I don't want to look. It'll take too long.
Jeb Sprague?
Yes, Jeb Sprague. That's exactly who it is.
It's in the comments. Someone got
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
V4571.
Yeah. Jeb Sprague. That's exactly it. Boy, I was not going to come up with that. What happened to that brain cell? Shit. Anyway, so Jeb says, you lied us into war and you ruined my family. My cousin has shell shock and it's destroyed his life and it's destroyed our family because of your lies. And you killed all these people. And so, but in this clip, you can't see Jeb. You can only see W. Bush up there. And at first, which by the way, I like to say that he looks terrible. He looks like, boy, has he aged every bit of 20 years since then. And I know I have too. And I don't know what the hell I'm going to look like in another 20. Pretty horrible, I bet. But man, does he look like shit, dude. He looks like Bill Clinton's been stomping on his face with his jack boots and like he deserves. And so at first, when Jeb is yelling at him, he's like, yeah, whatever. You know how these leftists are. They like to yell out at protests sometimes and stuff like that. And, that kind of attitude. Then one of the things that he said, I forgot which one it was, but one of the things that Jeb Sprague said, where he was like, "You're a killer, you're a liar, you belong in prison," whatever, something along those lines. And one of those things really got through. And you could see where W. Bush, like that Reddit, there's a Reddit I follow that's I watch people die inside. When like the girl they like kisses the other guy and they're like, "Oh, where?" And you can just see W. Bush, watch Bush die inside. When this guy says he pushes the right button and Bush goes from to, "Oh, yeah, that is true that I am a ruthless murderer." And then again, everybody boos the guy. Like, how dare you? And then the weirdo guy on the stage interviewing him was such a strange character who's like, oh, that's so impolite. You're being very rude to the audience by interrupting today and, trying to lecture the guy. But I just thought it was great. And I here W. Bush thought it was safe to go outside. And then there were at least a couple of people who made sure that, no, it ain't. You're not going to get away with this. Just the same. And I interviewed the guy. I don't know if you heard this. I interviewed the guy, Montezir, all whatever the fuck, who threw the shoe at Bush.
Yeah.
I interviewed him back a few weeks ago. And the point of that, people don't really realize maybe that was Bush's like last few weeks in office. That was in December of 2008 on his way out the door, lame duck session. So this was his like victory lap. He was going to go and do a PR thing and tour Iraq and say that he'd done a good job and created a democracy and mission accomplished and all this. And this guy's not going to let him get away with that. So he throws his shoes at him and says, this is for the widows and the orphans and all the dead men of Iraq and all that you've done here. And just, even though he missed with the shoes, which is unfortunate, he got his point across. They're like, no victory lap for you. This is your shame. It'll always be your shame, And then that's the same thing that Mike and Jeb have done this week too, to W. Bush. And I'm really grateful for it. He absolutely deserves that. 20 years after September 11th, look at what he does. He goes and isn't this a perfect kind of example of what he did 20 years ago too? He runs in cowardly terror to give his speech out in the field in Pennsylvania because he doesn't dare show up in New York. He's probably even afraid to show up at the Pentagon in D.C. and give a speech there. So he goes way out to the field in Pennsylvania where there'd be, essentially no access to him, where he can give kind of a canned speech to these people, where he wouldn't have dared showed up in downtown Manhattan just because of his own guilty conscience, projecting that what are people going to think? They're going to condemn me if I go there. I shouldn't go there. I'll go way out here and do it instead. Which, remember, on September 11th, what did he do? When he left the school, did he go to the airport and get on Air Force One and fly back to Washington, D.C.? No, he flew in cowardly terror to Louisiana. And then from there on to, I think, Barksdale. Is that Barksdale in Louisiana? And then from there, he went to Nevada to Strategic Air Command headquarters, to the hydrogen bomb-proof bunker a mile underground or whatever it is. I'm sure it's not that far, but a giant underground base where he hid in Nevada, in Nebraska, until he finally left there at like 5 o'clock or something like that to get back to DC by 7:30. And he didn't get back to DC until 7:30 that night. Which is, there's a lot of things that George Bush should be condemned for, but that's one of them, dude. What kind of loser, weak, pussy ass leader? He should have had to resign after that. He should have been forced out immediately after that. And not, for the attack happening at all, but then I just remember, and I resent, because I remember people in my cab, it's like they're minor birds. They watch TV and then they just go, yeah, I think he did a real great job being a leader that day. He did a great job that day, though. And they would all say that. And I go, oh, yeah, like what? Oh, I don't know. Well, what? He looked at the camera and gave a speech from the Oval Office that night or whatever? What did he do? That was such great leadership. He ordered all the jets into the sky. Did he do name one thing? And they can't. All they know is they heard that on TV 3 times, and now that's TV's magic wish on them that they have to say that now too. And so they go around going, well, I think he's a great leader, at least that day. The attack might have happened on his watch after only 8 months on the job and everything, but I thought he did a great job that day. And they would all just repeat it and repeat it. And I say, really? He fled to Nebraska. Like, can you imagine? I don't think there's another man in this country. Like, if you just, okay, that's not the right way to say it. If you just picked a man at random and put him in that job, he would have gone back to DC, right? Your neighbor, Jimmy, he would have gone back to DC. Flee to goddamn Nebraska. Anyway, I'm sorry. I just hate W. Bush so much, man. The fact that they're, rehabilitating him now, the Democrats are. He wasn't that bad. Not like that mean old Trump, just makes me so sick. I don't know. We're already over time.
Let's get out of here, man.
Let me condemn Tulsi Gabert. People mistook her. You got to remember, Barack Obama's war in Syria was outright batshit, clinically insane, just crazy shit. call the psychoanalyst, dude. What are we doing? We're backing Al-Qaeda suicide bombers. That ain't against a secular dictatorship. It's just nuts. So she was good on that. She was like, this is crazy. She was right about that. But she's always been a hawk on the terror war. And then her statement the other day on Tucker Carlson's show was like, look, it's the Islamist ideology at all. In other words, the ideology that Islam should be the ruling state system in Islamic countries. That's the ideology that drives terrorism. And she says that's the ideology of the government of Turkey, of Iran, of Pakistan, and wherever. She goes down the list. So we need to do targeted strikes against the terrorists. And the terrorists are the people who believe in Islamism. And the people who believe in Islamism is just about everybody, I guess, except, the military dictatorship in Egypt. Other than that, I guess we got to wage total war against everyone. And she throws in Iran too. So because it doesn't matter that they're Shiites, but as long as it's a theocracy, then same damn difference then. And so it's just nuts. And people are really surprised by that, but they shouldn't be, because she's always been a hawk. And she's still in the military right now. She just got back from Africa, where they were fighting some counterinsurgency campaign in, I don't know, Burkina Faso or Sierra Leone or some kind of thing, where the consequences from the Libya war have spread. And so she's going, over there, try to, and just gotten back from being a part of that. So anyway, it is a shame. And, I sent her my book, and she sent me a very nice postcard saying, thank you very much for the book, and I can't wait to read it and this kind of thing. But she either never read it or she hated it and thought it was stupid, because I pretty much debunk all of that in the book. I thought I did pretty well. And let me just say a couple things real quick about Afghanistan. The first thing is, go look at libertarianinstitute.org, everybody, because we got this great article by John Vaughn, and he was a soldier. He is a soldier, and he was there at the Kabul airport during this whole thing. And he wrote this absolutely fantastic essay for the Institute about what that was like on the evacuation in the fall of Kabul. So everybody go read that. That's at the Institute. And then I just want to say real quick, for people who haven't been keeping up, the Panjshir Valley resistance thing is over and done. The Taliban won. Masood's son fled to Tajikistan, a week ago or something. So that was the last bit of armed resistance to the Taliban in the entire country, at least for now, is done and gone and over. And then they declared a new state. They announced their new ministers, and almost all of them are Pashtuns. And original leaders of the Taliban going way back. And I think they named one Uzbek or one Tajik to some kind of position. Now, that's just the interim government, so we'll see if they, try to take a broader approach. But remember, the reason the war was impossible is because we were trying to foist a coalition of approximately 20% minority groups, 3 of them, totaling 60%, onto the 40% Pashtun population, who are the plurality. So that was a recipe for failure. It didn't work. But now that also means that the Pashtuns are still just a plurality, only 40%. And now they've got to figure out a way to lord it over 60%. Their political grouping, the Taliban leadership here, have to figure out a way to lord it over all the Hazaras, Uzbeks, and Tajiks too, of which there are millions, who are the super majority of the population, are not Pashtuns. So they have a huge task on their hand of trying to, form a coalition government that will be acceptable to those people. Otherwise, they're just going to face their own ongoing low-level insurgency, at least. Everybody kind of gave up quickly, and they took over the country quickly. But as Patrick Coburn said on my show, hey, there's still 5 million Hazaras. And if they're treated like outlaws for being Shiites, and the Taliban just do nothing but repress them and oppress them, then they're going to fight. And so we'll see how that goes. And then as far as the modernity thing, they closed the girls' schools. They said they're going to reopen them. They just got to figure out what all the rules are going to be and all of that. But I don't know if that's really true or not. But I think they kept open the elementary schools, but anything like junior high and above, I believe, are now, closed. So, I guess it's possible. I can't think of any examples, but I guess it's possible that someone could get me wrong to think that, like, oh, boohoo, you're on the side of the other guys in this war, All I ever said was that the war against them was useless. But I also have said all along that the Taliban are bastards. And, you know, for example, they have used suicide attacks against civilians as a tactic since at least, 2008 or 9, and have just committed absolute atrocities against civilians in this war. And they were bastards before that. The only thing that anybody ever liked about the Taliban in Afghanistan was that they were bastards, but it was just that they hanged pedophiles. And
Right.
so it was like, all right, now these bastards I can get along with because they bring law and order. They bring it hard as hell, but there's peace in the streets. And when you live in that kind of level of poverty and chaos, that's the kind of, you know, government that people will settle for. Is the Taliban are, you know, they at the top, they're corrupt, of course, but just their policemen on the street don't shake you down. They really, you know, are under orders to treat people with respect, and they more or less do, except when they don't. But I just mean, you know, they keep law and order, and on a sliding scale, that makes them the superior government compared to a lot of different options in that country, and that's been the case since the 90s. That's how they came to power in the first place, lynching pedophiles, going from town to town, and saying, we're here to kill your warlord or assimilate them. But we're the new sheriff in town. That's how it's going to be. And people celebrated. And I'm sure you saw this. People celebrated when they walked right into Kabul. And Kabul is like a super minority Pashtun population. I mean, the Pashtuns, I don't know what percentage they are in Kabul, but it's a very small percent. And maybe double digits, but certainly not a plurality of any kind. And they were welcomed into Kabul as Ghani fled with, you know, 100 million stolen dollars. You know, making an absolute mockery, you know, on the way out of the American thing. And of course, there was the suicide bombing and the drone attack that killed all those civilians, which I interviewed Matt Akins who's a freelance reporter who I've interviewed before, but who wrote for the New York Times the true story of that drone attack, and went and interviewed all the survivors the next day and chronicled and published the pictures of the toddlers who were killed and everything. It was 7 children and 3 adults who were killed from 2 families. And it just total mistaken identity. Just they attacked a guy who was a pro-American aid worker who had spent the day delivering water and food to poor people, and who was trying to get passage to the United States, and they killed him and all of his kin. And which is kind of the perfect fitting, you know, in that horrible black humor, ironic kind of way, the fitting end to that war, which has been nothing but events like that for 20 years straight. I mean, that's what they've been doing for 20 years straight, Pete. It's killing some guy and his kids because they thought they were hitting some bad guy. And that's the story of the whole damn Afghan war. And so then that's how it ended. So, oh, and then the good news, and then I'll shut up and I'll let you finish on this one more subject I want to bring up, and then whatever else you got too if you want. But the good news is I'm done recording the audiobook. I'm done editing the audiobook. And have you heard? You're not done yet, are you? I know you got a lot of stuff to do.
Yeah.
And it's long, man. It's long. But I sent it off to my guy who's doing the mastering on it to make it sound right. And then so we should have that published within the week. You know, as soon as he gets that back to me. I know he's out of the country right now, but he said he thinks he can do it just on his laptop with what he's got. Although he might have to bring it home, you know, before he can get it right. We'll see about that. But I think he said he thought he could get to it, and you know, while he's out of the country even. So should be able to get that get that to you guys here within the week or so. The audiobook of Enough Already. And then I wanted to ask you about this. Here's what I said at the beginning. If you remember I think it was it you or Dave? Oh, it was you. Wasn't it you that interviewed me right away about the vaccine passports? And I gave you the white pill explanation that it's not going to last. And I don't know if you saw this, where it's BLM protesters are going up against the vaccine mandate in New York City. Again, you know, sectarianism will lead you astray, right? Oh, damn leftists and damn liberals and progressives, they're my enemy on everything. No, they're not. And what's the biggest Achilles heel in the vaccine passports? That poor black people don't trust government health care because they know from experience that you can't. And so they won't take the vaccine. And super majority, I think it's a super majority of blacks under the age of 50 or something like that in New York are unvaccinated. And so then that means that the vaccine passport thing is just a de facto, and very quickly, just kind of immediately, it's a de facto racial segregation. And so then, of course, immediate reaction against that is you can't do that. And so I think that to me is the most, that was why I thought in the first place that it won't last. And then it looks like that's where the pushback is coming from. Some of it is coming from Black Lives Matter activists. I was wondering if you saw that, what you think of that.
Yeah, I saw it. I'm all for chaos, especially when things like this happen. When the 3 women from Houston went after the hostess, I didn't exactly champion it, but it was bound to happen.
Right.
And we were having a conversation today in a chat, and we were saying, unfortunately, it may take more incidents like that in order for this to really come to a head. And then when Black Lives Matter, it's like, okay, Black Lives Matter is going to go down there. I'm like, oh, this is great. I mean, I don't have to march with them. They don't need my support, but I'm going to watch with bated breath because I think it's just fantastic to see, to see these leftists go up against this leftist government and just watch leftists fight. It's like, I mean, enemy, 2 enemies fighting, as far as I'm concerned. And, I mean, I just think that it's going to be it's going to be a mass kind of resistance that's going to do it, especially like in New York City. You've already seen parades, they've already done marches, and I was looking at the people in the marches. I mean, these didn't look like right wingers to me. They look like they look like a lot of art students. They looked like it was pretty mixed, and that's pretty white pilling. But the one thing you worry about with New York and places like California is those are always the testing grounds when they want to go further in the country. So it has to be stopped right there, or else if it's not, it's going to be terrible. I mean, we're going to be there, we're going to be in New York next week, and to see exactly what it's going to be like there. And,
man, I mean, I'm
should be
debating Bill
interesting.
Kristol at that event, and it's, the event had changed the rules from a proof of vaccine to a negative PCR test, but then the city of New York changed the rules to no, it has to be a proof of vaccine for everyone. So I know a lot of people are mad at me about that I'm doing it, but it's, Gene Epstein has given me this opportunity to debate Bill Kristol, and it already got canceled. It was supposed to happen in May of 2020, and it already got canceled because of the lockdowns and everything then. So it's not the kind of thing that I would like to participate in because of the vaccine mandate part. I hate to think, the audience has got to go get a shot in order to go to it, or any kind of, whatever like that, if that's not what they want to do. But
Or
at the same time,
this is when agorism comes in.
Yeah. I mean, what am I going to do though? Right. Like I got to tell Gene, like, listen, we just got to do this thing in the middle of the street and whatever, you know what I mean? Like he's kind of doing this for me, giving me this opportunity. So I got to take it. But, I'm not looking forward to doing many more events where I have to give in this way. And I've seen like a lot of musicians, or at least some musicians, are announcing that they're not going to play in certain places where those are the rules and that kind of thing. So I would like very much to boycott New York City, but I can't do it next month. I got to make an exception for this because it's just too important. And what are you going to do, right? But
I hear you. Hey, let's get out of here. We've been going long.
Yeah, we should. Email me. People are asking me questions. Email me. Can we say everything on here? I think we did. All right. Well, thanks for doing the show with me, Pete. That was fun. Did we cover everything on your list there?
Yeah. Until the next time.
All right. See you guys.